Greetings, everyone in the room and everyone on Zoom. This is the Ward 5 Neighborhood Planning Assembly for December 15th. I want to note that our next meeting is January 19th, Thursday, January 19th. And I'm sure that we are a little light on attendance tonight, partly because of the Democratic caucus being at exactly the same time. My name is Andy Simon. I am on the Ward 5 NPA Steering Committee, and we are currently being joined by several other members of the steering committee: Nancy Stetson, Terry Rivers, Willie Clark, Joe Derry, and I see that David Shine is joining us tonight too. We're ably assisted by Sam Heinrichs from CEDO and by Charlie Giannoni from Channel 17. So, and we have a couple more people in the room here. Otherwise, it would be kind of lonely, you know. But let's start with the slides, if we could, just as a little introduction to our meeting. Welcome to the Ward 5 NPA. This is our lovely logo made by Amy Radcliffe of Gotham City Graphics. Could you move on to the next one? So we have some guiding principles. Our guiding principles are creating a safe space and a welcoming forum for people, being accessible in every way that that's possible, minimizing barriers physically and literally to get everybody involved. We try to be respectful of everyone, and that means cultural, economic, political differences, different perspectives. We try to keep a vitality about it, though it's harder with only a couple of people, but we'll still do it. And we do not endorse political candidates. We are resolutely non-partisan. Next slide, please. These are a slightly out of date list of our steering committee members. We have a website, npa5.org. You can also go through the CEDO site, the Burlington bt.gov site. This is Sam's name and how you can access this meeting by YouTube and cable access. So for those of you who are on Zoom, I'm assuming that at this point, years on in the pandemic, that everybody is pretty familiar with Zoom. If you want to be recognized, you could raise your hand and use the raise hand feature on Zoom. When you're not speaking, if you would mute, that would be great, and unmute. We'll remind you to unmute if you haven't. You can turn your webcam on and off. So if you're having a bad hair day, like I usually am, you can turn your camera off and just have your name there. You're welcome.
Hey, how's it going?
Hi. Good. All right. I think that's our last slide, right? Do we have another one? Ah, yes, our agenda. This is our agenda tonight. We'll have a 20-minute segment for public forum. Public forum is open to everyone and anyone. If you have a comment, question, suggestion, complaint, or otherwise, please use this time at public forum. At 7:20, we have Bridget and Lauren from the Community Justice Center. And at 7:50, we have Howard Center redevelopment. We have 3 presenters for Howard Center redevelopment. At 8:10, we have Rhino Foods talking about potential expansion on Queen City Park Road. We expect to adjourn at 8:30 tonight. When you are speaking in public forum, please identify yourself with your first and last name. Let us know where you live. If you are speaking as an organization, please identify that organization and limit yourself to 4 or 5 minutes in your comments, please. All right, so we're here for public forum. The forum is open for any comments on any topic. As I noted, the Democratic caucus is happening at this very moment. So we may have fewer people tonight than usual. We're planning for I wanted to say that we're planning for the January meeting, either at the regular meeting or having a public meeting or a special meeting about public safety and gun violence. So we will be continuing the theme that Bridget and Lauren are starting tonight to talk about issues of public safety. So stay tuned for that, and we'll put that out on Front Porch Forum to let people know what's coming up. Anybody else want to speak at public forum? Anything to announce, to suggest, observations, questions?
Andy, I'll speak quickly to the topic you were just raising. Hi, I'm Billy Clark. I'm a Ward 5 NPA steering committee member, and I live on Locust Terrace. And yeah, as Andy just flagged, we're hoping to do either a special meeting or at a regular meeting in January, hopefully January or soon thereafter, a discussion of public safety. We definitely recognize that has been an issue that many of us have faced in Burlington. I myself was one of the people who had property damage from the large incident on the south end when there was windows broken. And while that didn't affect my personal safety, certainly it was a scary moment. And that's on top of many of the other, issues that we've seen arise. I don't, not trying to set a narrative of that. I guess what I'm hoping we can do is if folks have particular issues that they want to talk about, if there's people they want to hear from, if there's voices they want included in the conversation, we as a steering committee would love to hear from you before that, and certainly would love it if you could come to our meeting in January. This is something that it weighs on my mind a lot, and I want to make sure that we are it's a conversation that can be done poorly very easily and is very hard to do right. And so we would want to get as many people participating as we can and want to make sure we do it correctly. So if there's voices that you think need to be at the table, please reach out to us as we try to make that a interesting and productive conversation.
Thank you, Billy. Any other comments for public forum?
David Shine is his hand up right now.
David, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, this is just a question because I think it's going to be covered. I wanted to talk about gun violence and youth and things like that, but I don't know if this is the time to talk about it or later in this evening or in January.
Did you have a comment about it?
I have some suggestions that may be germane to right now or later in terms of my experiences in Chicago working with gang kids and youth, and the absence of a public youth commission in Burlington. But I don't know if this is the right time to make a comment about it, or if there'll be a question and answer during the presentation of the people following me.
Can I speak to that?
Yeah.
There are a few folks that are working on this issue of youth and gun violence in Burlington, and so I'd be happy to connect you to those folks. I work at the Burlington Community Justice Center, and I've been in conversation about this and have my ears on what's happening. So I think what you would have to share is important, and I'd be happy to connect you to the folks that you could share those ideas with.
Okay, and how will you connect me?
I can get your email address. Somebody can give that to me here. No, you can. Yeah, I'll get your email address. What's your name?
I'm David Shine. I'm affiliated with Big Heavy World, which operated 242 Main. And in Chicago, I did a lot of youth programming with gang kids. And I see what's happening in Burlington with the New American community, and it's all too familiar. And there are certain programmatic things that might address some of the problems.
I'll connect you to the right folks then.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Thanks, David. We look forward to
Yeah.
hearing.
No, thank you, David. And that's definitely flagging a topic that we want to go into more. And just to talk, what I'm a attorney with the Giffords Law Center to Prevent Gun Violence, working for them out of Burlington, and have been doing a lot of these community violence initiatives. And that's definitely something we want to continue to do in our community and find ways to bring that locally. And I also would love to be connected with you all at the Community Justice Center. That's been on my mind to do. So my email is on the website for our ward, and would love to do work with you all at some point. Probably both professionally and not unprofessionally, but personally.
Great. Well, we're right here.
Great. If only I was there.
All right.
Are there other general comments or specific comments that don't have to do with public safety and gun violence for a public forum? Anything anybody would like to bring up? All right, well, hearing none, why don't we move along? We'll be ahead of schedule. Maybe we can give you a little extra time. If you want, please, if you would introduce yourselves,
Yeah.
and if you could leave plenty of time for questions.
Sure thing. Yeah, it's funny you should say we might have some extra time because our presentation is actually quite long. But we've shortened it.
Thank you.
And yesterday we had our first kind of exact presentation. We didn't go overtime. It was great. And so we won't, but it's technically 45 minutes, we've been told. So just 20 minutes today. There's more information though, if anybody wants it. My name is Lauren Monaco Eddings. I use she, they pronouns, and I'm a restorative justice practitioner and victim services specialist at the Burlington Community Justice Center.
Hi, my name is Bridget Blazik. I'm a victim services specialist along with Lauren, and we doing the presentation now?
Yeah, let's just launch right in.
We're launching it, okay.
Jump it in.
Yeah, so my name is Bridget and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And yeah, we're really looking forward to speaking with you all tonight.
Some context on the presentation. We're excited to introduce it as the first presentation within what we hope will be a series of community information sessions. We've been working with a lot of different folks over the last 3 or 4 months around public safety. And so that includes our state's attorney, Sarah George, as well as crime victims, as well as people doing direct services to inform the bulk of this presentation. And as victim services specialists, we talk to people who've been impacted by crime, harm, and violence almost every day. And we're fielding a lot of feedback and a lot of concerns as well on the state of public safety in Burlington right now. And so we thought it would be in the best interest of our community, given the roles that we have with our community, to offer up a presentation, and hopefully folks will feel more connected to resources in the community and then also feel a little bit heard.
Can I ask you a clarifying question before you begin?
Yeah.
Is the Community Justice Center housed in the Burlington Police Department or in CEDO, or are you completely separate?
So we are within CEDO, the Community Economic Development Office. That is our department that we live within. We are also our own organization as well, but all of our grants, for example, go through CEDO. And we work closely with CEDO folks, have staff meetings with them every month. And so, yeah, it's a little bit confusing, but Bridget is with the CJC. However, her position is based at the Burlington Police Department.
Okay,
So the Parallel Justice Program, which is where we are, we're split. So Lauren's at the CJC and then I'm at the BPD. So basically it's like victim services. Split for both agencies.
thank you.
Great. Let's go into some objectives.
All right, so yeah, so in the next slide, Sam's gonna be in charge of doing the slides for us. Thank you again, Sam.
Sam with CEDO.
So we're gonna review current issues in Burlington. know what to expect after a crime happens, understand root causes of crime, identify community-based approaches to public safety and harm, and become familiar with resources in the community. And then afterwards, we'll have a question and answer period where, yeah, it looks like we'll have plenty of time to go through those.
Because we are community focused and community driven, we're gonna begin the presentation with some quotes from our community members on what public safety means to them. It is not criminal to be poor, to be mentally unwell, or to have an addiction, and yet we treat it like it is. Mutual respect between police and people. Yes to more community-based social workers. Not jumping to the conclusion that an unusual situation is a dangerous one. A community that doesn't jump to fear-based reactions. Decriminalization of substance use addiction. Neighbors knowing each other, saying hello to each other, not being afraid of being friendly to each other. Police departments that are supportive of progressive police.
So in this slide here, as we can see, folks are interested in community approaches to community violence, which typically involves a relatively small number of people, but has a lasting impact on the entire community. We also know that violence is learned, which means that circumstances that increase a person's risk of becoming a victim or an offender can be undone. We will discuss prevention later in the presentation, but first we wanted to talk about current issues in Burlington. This image shows reported incidents of crime as of mid-November. So this is from the police chief's report. And something to highlight is that these are reported crimes and not unreported crimes. So we realize that this doesn't capture maybe all of crime or all of issues facing Burlington, but it's a good representation of the general climate. Of note, there has been considerable increases in incidents of gunfire, larcenies, mental health issues, overdoses, and stolen vehicles.
Also of note is at the Burlington Community Justice Center, we don't see mental health issues, overdose, and overdoses as crimes. We see these as public health issues. However, currently with this data, we are viewing it as a crime, and that's how we're responding to it. And that's why the data is shown in this way.
And then in the next slide is just a different representation of the same numbers, but in percentages. In that red box there shows where, again, maybe we can be well informed to target programming into these issues that we're facing, including stolen vehicles. So as you can see, stolen vehicles have the highest increase. So it's 435% increase in stolen vehicles. It's happening pretty regularly. But what we're seeing is that the recovery rate also is very high, but the condition that the vehicle is returned is not what you might expect. You can expect needles, bodily fluids, stolen items, and personal items from the person who stole a vehicle that are left behind, indicating that the car is being used as shelter or a consumption room for drugs and then left abandoned when gas runs out. The data of stolen cars indicates a need for housing and support for substance use. In a few moments, we will discuss the root causes of crime and how to use data and program implementation to address the needs of folks in an effort to deter them from using crime as a solution to social issues. And then this next slide, I know for some of us in the room, maybe it's hard to see, but it's a simple flow of what happens after a crime occurs that leads to an identifiable suspect. We recognize that some of you in the room have may be very familiar with crime in Burlington and know all too well how this flow chart operates. We at the Burlington Community Justice Center realize that incidents of crime and harm in our city have had a tremendous impact on individuals, families, and neighbors. And that these impacts have been significant. The losses have been emotional, tangible, physical, monetary, and traumatic. And we are sorry that some of you have been victims of assault, larceny, burglary, and stolen vehicles, to name a few. We hope that you have felt supported by the community in the aftermath, but if you have not felt supported, that's partly why we are here. As Lauren mentioned, we have had a lot of discussions with folks over the last several months, and we sense that the community is just feeling disconnected and mistrustful of neighbors and systems in place to help them. And we're here to let you know that there are resources available, which we will get into towards the end.
Do you mind a question in the middle of this so we don't have to like flip back to the slide? Or would you rather wait for questions at the end?
We've been holding for questions, but we've also had like, Lorna said, like,
We're
very
flexible.
time frame, so.
Well, I just, in terms of this chart that you have up right now. If there's no report of a crime, how does that line go down to parallel justice?
We are gonna talk about that.
Yay, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
So, yeah, so I can start with like the report and then Lauren can kind of give you a preview of what it would look like with no report. So after a crime occurs, you have a report with an officer or online. The investigation takes place and arrest is made. The officer then has the option of submitting the case for review to the state's attorney's office or giving a direct referral to the Burlington Community Justice Center. In which case the Community Justice Center supports the victim through parallel justice and a victim liaison. And then the person responsible goes through a restorative justice, an alternative justice process. And they are also supported through a case coordinator. In that case, upon successful completion, the charges are dismissed. They're never gone to the court. The state's attorney's office can decide to prosecute, decline, or send to diversion. Similarly, if they go through diversion and successfully complete, diversion is held at the Community Justice Center. Upon successful completion, the charges are dismissed. So the charges no longer exist. And then in the instance of a no report.
So we have this line there to really emphasize that we are available to people regardless of criminal justice system involvement. There are a lot of folks each year that never report their crimes and their harms to the police. And there are a lot of reasons for that, some of which include not feeling safe going to the police, some of which include not knowing how that process works. And so we're available to any and all communities to answer their questions, whether that's giving them information about how the system works, or that's to help them find justice and healing outside of the criminal justice system. And so there's a line there really to express that at any point in the way of experiencing and looking for justice and healing, we are available to support those folks.
And similarly, the state's attorney's office, so if the case is not sent to diversion or to Community Justice Center, the victim advocate is available at the state's attorney's office, who we would communicate with, like in case there was any conversation that took place before it goes to the state's attorney's office.
Sam, there's one person who's on as an attendee. Could you promote them as a panelist just so that in case they have want to participate? Thank you.
Thanks for multitasking.
Tried it before, so if they don't.
Oh, okay.
But that's.
All right, I interrupted the slideshow, sorry.
That's okay. And then you go to the next slide. So the next slide shows what happens when crime occurs and it leads to no suspect. So the beginning of the process is similar. A crime occurs, the person can choose to either make a report or not. The officer will investigate with the information that they have available, but no arrest is made, right? So what happens in those cases can be really frustrating and discouraging, but it's also just a real possibility. But if the investigation, so if it turns up no leads and no solvability factors, the case may lead to no arrest, and solvability factors include things like date and time, witnesses, and supporting evidence, which are not clear in all cases, such as a larceny from a motor vehicle or vandalism. So here in Burlington, a lot of folks park their cars on streets. I live in a neighborhood where you can see the car parked, like for days at a time, it doesn't move. So in cases like that, if there's a vandalism, it makes it unlikely that it could lead to a suspect because there's hard, you're not able to find like a correct date or time for the person. But even if that leads to no investigation or no suspects, we want to let you know the victim services are still available through parallel justice. And we offer information, resources, emotional support, safety planning, and limited financial assistance.
And additional context around this slide and why we're sharing it is we've noticed in our conversation with folks who are experiencing vandalism and property crimes that there's a lot of frustration about a lack of a police response. And so often what Bridget and I will have to do is, in a trauma-informed way, explain, this is how the criminal justice system works. When there's no suspect, when the police are not able to identify a suspect through the investigation, there's no charges. And so for that person, it feels like there's no justice. And there's still a need there, and it can't necessarily be met through the criminal justice system. It can look to being met through victim services. And that includes safety planning that we can do, that includes emotional support. It also includes limited financial assistance as well. Because we do understand that folks who experience crime can be materially impacted by that. And so that's to say, again, it's asking people to think, what are their needs in the face of a crime? And that we are people that folks can surely call to figure that out. Okay, so my favorite slide. To prevent crime, we need to understand and respond to its roots. And people who experience multiple arrests, which make up for 1/4 of all overall arrests each year, are people who experience significant health needs that are overwhelmingly unmet before, during, and after criminal justice system involvement. Fortunately, in Chittenden County, we do have a growing emphasis on services for people with mental health and substance abuse disabilities who come into contact with the criminal justice system. This is a step in the right direction of treating substance abuse, mental illness, and poverty as public health issues. And I am excited to live in a community that has increasingly shown its support for its community members who experience such significant barriers in health equity. So there's a graph in the middle here, and that was done by the Prison Policy Initiative, and they used nationally representative data from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health to find that at least 4.9 million people that were arrested and jailed in 2017, at least 1 in 4 of those folks were booked into jail more than once during the same year. The graph there will tell you that over half of the people that were booked into jail more than twice, half of those folks had a substance use disorder. 1/3 of them were booked more than twice. They had serious psychological distress, with 25% experiencing a serious or moderate mental illness. And 27% of those folks that were booked more than twice had no health insurance. The report also concluded that people with multiple arrests are disproportionately Black, low income, and unemployed, and that the vast majority of arrests for that year were for non-violent offenses, and that is often true for every year. Low-level offenses like drug abuse violations and disorderly conduct make up for over 80% of all arrests, with serious violent offenses accounting for less than 5% of arrests. Another way to put all of this is to say that most people who are arrested multiple times a year don't pose a serious public safety risk, and are folks that are instead being punished for not getting their basic needs met. I can't help but consider how at present we are relying on a system of punishment to address an issue of health and life chances. Research, information, relationship building, and understanding, however, can direct public and community investments in care. This would include employment assistance, education and vocational training, financial assistance, mental health and substance use treatment options, and checking in on your neighbors. These are investments that can help heal the conditions that lead our community members to police contact in the first place. I'm going to go into what ACEs are and more of what this tree represents, so don't worry about that. I was surprised to find that there is a significant lack of research on the relationship between adverse childhood experiences, so those are shown right next to the tree, also known as ACEs, and adult criminal justice system contact. Considering that exposure to trauma, particularly in childhood, has been associated with a greater risk of substance use disability and mental illness, and that a significant amount of adults who go to jail each year experience these adversities, then the lack of research on this relationship is a critical limitation and a key area for crime and harm prevention. So ACEs are determined by an assessment that was created by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. The assessment uses a scoring system that attributes 1 point for each category of adverse childhood experiences. The questions each cover a different domain of trauma and refer to experiences that occurred prior to the age of 18. Higher scores, like 4 or above, with the highest score being 10, indicate increased exposure to trauma, especially when that score is informed by adverse community environments, and those are represented in the roots of that tree, like racism, poverty, poor housing quality and affordability, lack of opportunity, and overall community destruction. The 2022 research study from the Academic Pediatric Association that I was able to review confirmed that the research on ACEs and criminal justice system contact in adulthood was indeed lacking. And the study introduced itself as the first of its kind. And I was truly surprised to see this because these are both assessments that I've used in the last 10 years in my work doing a lot of direct services, particularly with children who've experienced significant trauma, who then go on to have criminal justice system contact. I was surprised that the Academic Pediatric Association confirmed that there was a significant lack of research on the correlation between adverse childhood experiences and then adult criminal justice system contact. There is research that will confirm adverse childhood experiences and juvenile justice system contact, but not for adults that are incarcerated. So considering that criminal justice system is disproportionately composed of adults who have experienced childhood adversity, punishing these individuals is not an effective approach to improve lives that have already been so characterized by harm. We are victim services specialists. We speak with victims and affected parties in restorative processes every single day. And so it would be a disservice if we were not informing our presentation with what victims want for justice. This might come as a surprise to some, but a significant percentage of victims of both violent and nonviolent crime prefer increased investments in treatment options for those who have caused harm over prisons, jails, and law enforcement. A national survey on victims' views, which was also the first national survey of its kind, conducted by the Alliance for Safety and Justice in 2016, found that the overwhelming majority of the diverse sample of crime victims that they surveyed believe that the criminal justice system relies too heavily on incarceration. This data and the slide are incredibly important to us, to our roles working with people who've experienced harm and crime, and to my own process as I try and imagine what a world with less harm will look like. I know that I won't get to that imagining without also recognizing that things like public safety and justice mean different things to different people and communities, and that all communities have both survivors and people that have caused harm within them. I'm not here to tell any one person what safety or justice should mean or look like to them. I do also know that oftentimes people who experience victimization have been victimized before, and that many people who cause harm to others have themselves been victimized by harm. Great. So as we shared earlier, Bridget and I are victim services specialists at the Burlington Community Justice Center. I am also a restorative justice practitioner, and I work with all of our youth cases where there are an identified victim. Oftentimes those victims are youthful offenders, also teenagers, but sometimes they are also adults. And yeah, great.
Yeah. And it's also important to note that for victims, justice can mean many different things, and that's what parallel justice is, offering support to achieve justice in the form of that emotional support, safety planning, systems advocacy, resource coordination, and the limited financial assistance we had mentioned earlier. And we've recognized that, you know, a victim may not see inside the courtroom and never have the opportunity to influence like sentencing judgment for a charged crime, and that is traditional justice, but parallel justice can fill a gap and give choice to victims so that they can create their own path towards justice. So Burlington Community Justice Center has a lot of different programs, and that's just like a little snippet of like what parallel justice, what we would do.
And we also have our conflict assistance program. So this is another alternative to criminal justice system involvement. And this is a program, it's run by Zoe, who shares an office with me, and she connects with folks in the community who are experiencing conflict with their neighbors or their families. So she does one-on-one conflict coaching. She also does mediation, where she'll bring both parties together. And you can also look to presentations that she does in the community. Well, actually, we're looking to fill that position. So if anybody knows anyone who wants to do that, but she's built up a really incredible program. And a lot of the work that she did also involved teaching community members their own toolkit of skills to navigate conflict themselves. And so you'll see on the screen, this is the symbol of the CAHOOTS model based out of Oregon. CAHOOTS, or Crisis Assistance Helping Out on the Streets. That's a mobile crisis intervention program that provides free confidential services in Eugene and the Springfield metro area in Oregon. Free response is available for a broad range of non-criminal cases, which includes homelessness, intoxication, disorientation, substance abuse and mental illness, and dispute resolution. When people are experiencing a mental health, substance use, or housing issue, what they need is understanding, clear directions, and specific support services. People experiencing crisis are often further escalated, and more harm can be done when they see the presence of an armed officer on their own. For me, being in community with folks who experience mental health and substance use disabilities means checking my impulses on how I can help them. I am really grateful to the community support liaisons at the Burlington Police Department who are doing a lot of this work in our city. And Bridget's going to share a little bit more about what they do.
Yeah, so in the next, so we have the Crisis Advocacy and Intervention Program, so CATE for short, that's housed within the Burlington Police Department. It's a coordinated effort among multiple city departments, so it includes the CSL, as Lauren had mentioned, myself being the Victim Services Specialist based at BPD, as well as a domestic violence victim advocate, a domestic violence prevention officer. And so it's just, like I said, a coordinated approach. So maybe I'm dealing with somebody who's been a victim of a crime, but is also facing chronic houselessness and needs some support in that. I can then do a soft handoff to the CSL, who can then carry them through like housing application process, getting them set up into housing and things like that. So that's just like some two local efforts that are community-based approaches, including CAHOOTS, which is a well-known national, or based in Eugene, Oregon. And then, as you can see in the next, we have quite a few others. So as Lauren mentioned, we have Howard Center. They have a street outreach team who build rapport with community members who they see on an everyday basis. So then that way they can help, prevent them from reaching crisis, but it can also respond to crises. We have the peer workforce, which just received a grant to help those who are facing unemployment and need help getting into the workforce. Turning Point, which is a peer recovery support group. New York City has a neighborhood safety committee, so it's similar to ComStat that we have here that faces, uses data and other stakeholders to do substance use treatment and prevention. They have a neighborhood safety. So those are just some different models, I guess, similar to what we could use here as community-based approaches.
And a big reason why we have this slide here is because oftentimes when there is a crisis and when it feels like things are changing, it's hard to remember that there are people in the community who do care about you, and people that do have a pulse on the situation and are there to help. And so we wanted to include, some local organizations and local efforts to let folks know that there are people who are there, including us, and our doors are open to support people through what we've identified as a changing time for a lot of Burlingtonians. The secret to a healthy community lies in our relationships to one another. This is something that Bridget and I would talk about before seeds of whether or not to do a presentation were planted, during, and then also right now, continuing to think on it. Genuine partnerships between our community members, policymakers, community-based organizations, particularly those led by formally justice system involved people, advances community trust, public safety and health, and racial equity. Without collaboration and relationships, we're going to fail to meet the needs of residents and cause unintended harm for communities that are already overburdened by systemic harms like incarceration and a lack of effective public investment. I'm hopeful and optimistic, though, that our relationships with each other in Burlington and in Vermont will continue to grow in becoming a community based on care and resilience. Thank you.
And then next slide is just a thank you to some partners that we've reached out to and connected with. They gave a lot of great feedback. Question and answers. This is our contact information. There's some community safety tips that show maybe some things that you're doing already, or maybe some things that you haven't thought of that help you with house safety, car safety, bike safety. There's some apps that are included in there. So that way, if you're walking and just feeling unsafe, there's some apps that will connect you directly to like a 911. So you're welcome to look at that through the QR code or on our website.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I feel like this is bringing up lots of questions. I know it is for me. So we have 10 more minutes or 8 more minutes for questions right now. I invite anybody who has questions about this to bring them up to Lauren and Richard.
Can I also say one last thing before questions?
Of
I'm really
course.
excited for these questions, and I do like to let people know that the content of the presentation is pretty dense. And so, you know, some people might find it helpful to know that you can think on it and sleep on it and reach out to us with questions tomorrow. And that these are all really complicated topics and subjects. And it is hard to do that in a short amount of time. So if it does feel like something wasn't there that should have been, we would love to know that information as well.
Any questions for Bridget and Lauren? I'm left with lots of words, and not saying that you had too many words, but there are lots of words that are very complex, like safety, like justice, like harm. And I'm trying to get a handle on where your program and the adverse childhood experiences. So where your program latches onto these things. And I hear that you are coming from a victim support angle, but there's so many different connections that you've made. I'm wondering, like, what you feel like we can do as a community, or what you can do in your work to address adverse childhood experiences, multiple definitions of public safety and what that means, various interpretations of what justice means. Is that a sufficiently vague enough question to give you lots of opportunity?
There's a lot of listening
Yeah.
that happens.
Listening to whom?
Listening to your neighbors, listening to the community, listening to people that feel hurt and unheard in the community. And so that's really deep listening to. That's thinking about, you know, what are the judgments, or what are the things, what are my own feelings that are coming up when I'm listening to this other person speak. And then having a conversation with those feelings and those parts that come up, and then being like, okay, I'm gonna come back to this person who's upset. And I'm gonna figure out what they're upset about and how I can support them, which takes a lot of listening. I think oftentimes when we're not listening, or when we're not doing enough listening, there's a tendency to, I want to fix the situation. I want to do something, and I want to do it now. And when things are really complex, we just can't do that, right? And I think actually we can cause more harm when we think that we can. I think it comes from a really good place, you know, that kind of wanting to help right away, wanting to do something, wanting to help someone who's hurt. And I come against this in my work all the time. I wish I could just make it all go away, and I can't. What I can do is hold on to what somebody is sharing with me, and maybe make things feel a little bit lighter for them at the time, which might be, oh, I know a person that you can call in the community who can give you a discount on, you know, fixing your tires or something. Or there's a support group, and they meet at, they meet downtown 2 times a week. And I think you would really like that, because that's a group for single mothers who are overcoming substance use. So just knowing what's in the community and kind of, I think that's one way for community members who want to be in community with other people. It's like, okay, what's happening in Burlington? Because there actually is a lot. There are a lot of people in Burlington who care. It's knowing what's there and then checking in on your neighbors, and doing a lot of listening. Mhm.
I think it's also important to know that like somebody, like these conversations have come up from like victim perspective. But we also know that like victims, and that can easily flip flop. So we also work with, so like we're coming from, like a victim services standpoint, and maybe I heard a little bit, like we talk about like harm and justice as well. And we know because these people who have been victims have been harmed, and then the person who is doing the harm has also been harmed, maybe, like at some point in their life. And so we work with both community members as if, like from a clean slate, we give them what they need and like try to sort out like the needs that they have. And also knowing, like it was explained to us, which I thought was really good explanation, that like basically somebody's worst day. So like my worst day could be somebody's baseline. That could be like their everyday, my worst day. And so just like kind of keeping that perspective and knowing that like different, like we're all coming from different places and like not passing like judgment, and people who are struggling maybe show their struggles out on the streets every day. But we also know that our neighbor next door may be having a similar struggle, we just don't see it. And so that's why like getting to know your neighbors is, helpful. And that's what we've heard is like people, like block parties and just knowing who to turn to when they're feeling like they have nobody.
Does that answer your question? Do you want?
Begins to answer my
Yeah.
question, but I want to leave time for other people's questions as well.
It's a good question. I like hearing you say how complex those issues are, because they are very complex.
Other questions? Tiff.
Hey, Tiff.
Hello. Thanks for this presentation. One of the things that I think you touched on and that I've been impressed by in conversations with folks in well, really everywhere about public safety is kind of this recognition of what you're just talking about, the complexity of the problem. I mean, public safety is affected by so many different things. And we put out a survey, and we had well over 50 people respond to it. And their responses in terms of priorities related to, public safety was high, but so was mental health treatment, and substance abuse treatment, and options for short-term housing for folks who were in crisis. I wonder, these are problems that are very much affected by the values of our federal government and the policies that state government has followed. And I am wondering, we're going to talk with the mayor tomorrow about the mayor's priorities in terms of the state legislature this year. I'm wondering what you would say about that. What if we could do, 2 or 3 things this year, what would they be? Or is that unfair to ask you because you would be speaking for the city and
Well, one of the slides that didn't make it in there, which I think was one of Lauren's slides that she did, was talks about like basically, and I think I've mentioned this to even the city councilors who are in this ward, like basic things, which seem basic, like lighting. Like I know
strategies.
like my street is very dark. It makes it very easy for somebody to see you coming, but you not see them. It makes it easy for a car to be broken into. So like lighting in the city, I think is something. We have abandoned buildings, vacant buildings that people are able to like graffiti, and always like managing that. So like sidewalks are, like just So I think that can be improved, I guess, like the city wide is a good start. But then also, yeah, I mean, like programs like substance use. Like
Inpatient hospitalization options for people with substance use disability and mental health.
Yeah.
Going back to situational crime prevention strategies, another example could be, okay, if there's a lot of vandalism that happens, if there's a lot of graffiti in places that it's not supposed to be, what about a place where it could be? You know, I don't think that we're gonna be able to get rid of the issue of, I think people doing graffiti is a tale of old time, and I don't see that going away. What could be interesting, again, a situational crime prevention strategy, so in identifying like, what is the crime in this area? And what are some infrastructure changes I could make? I think lighting, so better lighting. I did read something about city council trying to improve lighting on the bike path. I think that's great. I also think that's, as Bridget named, with all of the car larcenies that we see in Burlington every year, seeing better lighting on the street, right? I also think that I appreciate you naming how structural the issue is and how it's structural and it's also value driven within that structure. I think oftentimes if a person who's sitting at that table is a person who's experienced that very harm that people are trying to parse, then oftentimes that can be very helpful. So I would also say, you know, look to the people who have experienced repeated right? And what do they imagine for their community? What would they like to see? I think there's a lot of, and it makes sense to me. I mean, you know, we want to understand issues better. Something that can get lost is how much we can learn from people with that lived experience, right? Who've lived it themselves and who've reflected on it and who've processed it and who've tried to heal. Those are people who have really good ideas too.
Thank you. I would love to continue this discussion. We're now past time. And I want to remind people that we're going to continue. David, I see your hand is up and I hope that we'll be able to continue this discussion another time. Public safety is going to be another theme for our January meeting.
Great.
And perhaps meetings. And I'm wondering whether we could invite you back to be part of that.
Yeah.
We'll be in touch.
Great. Can't wait.
And I appreciate everybody's questions. I'm sorry we didn't have time for more. But thank you for coming.
Thank you so much for having us. If you do have lingering questions, if something wakes you up in the middle of the night, just shoot us an email. Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next topic is Howard Center redevelopment. Who's here for that? Sandy, Sam. I think all in one place. Is it better over there, Charlie?
Right, so if I can get this women to, you guys can take that whole corner.
Okay.
And use the working mic.
Peggy, you could move over here if you want.
You get the PDF, okay? Where it's then you're gonna share drive. Drive here. Yeah.
Sorry to have to move you.
You can sit there.
If you could, before anybody speaks, if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, say your first name, last name, who you're representing, and what you're here to talk about.
I'll point to you when I want to.
Sam, are you starting?
I am going to start, yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam Beal. I'm a principal at Duncan Vishneski Architecture and also a neighbor. I live down the street on Flynn Avenue. And so it's been a pleasure to work with Howard Center on their proposed redevelopment at the corner of Pine and Flynn. With me is Sandy McGuire, the CFO and COO of Howard Center, as well as Joe White, who is the project manager from Whiteburg. So Sam, if you could bring up the presentation, please. So I believe everyone should be, who's in the neighborhood should be familiar with this site. We're at the corner of Pine and Flynn. It's the sort of Z-shaped building there with some ponding on the membrane roof. Behind us is the Redstone apartment building. To the south, left on your screen is St. Anthony's. To the top of your screen is the Flynn Avenue Co-op, and then Anglesby Brook, which is the forested piece, is on your right. And I should have mentioned this before I launched in, but I want to keep this presentation relatively brief so that y'all have time for questions. And so if you do have detailed questions, please ask them. I can nerd out and engineer out as hard as you want, but I want to keep this light and brief for now. So that's the existing conditions. We do not have control of the corner parcel, which is a fourplex owned by another party. Howard Center did approach them, but they're not interested in selling. And so we believe in property rights in this country. So we're going to work on the parcel that we do control, which is bounded by Flynn and Pine and the Brook and Flynn Avenue Co-op. So this is the existing condition. We started working with Howard Center last year on looking at this site, trying to understand zoning, what the potential was. We did look at the existing building and try to understand what it could be useful for. It's not in great condition. The floor-to-floor heights are limited. There's no fire suppression system. And because it was originally, at least part of it was a convent, it's very cellular and difficult to be repurposed. And so while we did try to look at a reuse for this building, we ultimately determined there wasn't space sufficient in the existing building to do what Howard Center would like to do with this site. So Sam, if you want to advance. So sorry for the switch in view. We're now looking from the south towards the proposed redevelopment. Flynn Avenue Co-op is on your left. The Redstone apartment building is on the upper right corner. And so what we are proposing is a new 52,000 square feet, essentially office building with some additional uses. We do have some covered parking as well, a total of 98 parking spaces. And so the entrance, it's a classic conundrum where we want to have a welcoming front door that faces the street, but we also have many clients and staff who are coming by car. And so I don't have a pointer, but on the southwest corner of the building is our main entrance, which faces the Flynn Avenue as well as towards the parking lot. So we tried to acknowledge both entrances in order to create a unified entry for all people who are experiencing the site. If you go forward one more slide, I think the next one is the planting plan. This is a more technical drawing, but you can begin to see the shape of the building. Underneath the parking lot are stormwater retention chambers. Currently, all the stormwater goes untreated into the Anglesby Brook. Most of my neighbors will know that the brook is an impaired watershed. And so this project will ameliorate those flows and hold and retain that water before it's released after it's been treated back into the brook. Ultimately, people will arrive by bike, by walking, or by car, and staff and client will be using this building. But Sandy here is going to talk a little bit about the use of the building, who will be working as well as seeking services at the building. And so I'm going to let her speak to that, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit more about the aesthetics and the fun part of the building. So Sandy, please.
Thanks, Sam. I'm Sandy McGuire, Howard Center staff. Thank you all for having us tonight. For folks who might not be familiar with Howard Center, we provide support to over 19,000 of our community members annually across 60 locations, primarily addressing developmental, mental health, and substance use disorders. The current building that we're talking about tonight is one of 3 primary hubs, all located in Burlington for our services. On this particular site, we've been here for 47 years. The use is a hub or a home base for staff who provide outpatient services, both on site and out in the community, but this is their touchdown spot and home base. It is a fabulous location that has served us well. It's close for our clients that we serve. And as Sam mentioned, it can be accessed by walking, cycling, by car, or by bus. And it's an ample sized property that we believe will meet our needs. There are a long list of cons with the physical limitations of the building, given the building's age and many of the accessibility items that it does not afford us. So as we look forward, we're looking for a building designed utilizing modern day design approaches to create and support a welcoming, inclusive, supportive, and functional spaces for our clients and our staff. To continue providing the services that are currently provided on site. That includes service coordination, psychiatry, individual and group therapy, and to co-locate some of those same services that are currently off-site to make them more accessible for clients. So clients aren't having to go to multiple locations to receive their services. It would also house our 24/7 call center and our access and intake team that includes our cultural liaison team, and have space for new on-site primary care services to be co-located for our clients as well. So in addition to the convenience for clients that we expect, the co-location of staff and physical proximity to one another also supports their working together as a multidisciplinary care team for the benefit of our clients and our greater community. And so as we continue our exploration and planning, we're thrilled to be here tonight and to hear folks' questions and feedback as we continue to ponder and develop.
Great. So Sam, if you want to bring up that rendering, please. So this is a rendering of the new structure. If you were standing at the new curb cut, which is just to the right of the existing curb cut, looking towards the main entrance. And so we have a suspended canopy there that again creates that dual sense of entrance, both from the parking as well as from the street. And you'll see along the Flynn Avenue facade, a series of teal CMU columns that create a punctuated rhythm along that street and create a deepened facade on the street level, which is where a lot of the access and intake and some of the more private forward-facing function will take place. Above that copper band with the teal columns, we have a white lap siding and large lap siding with dichroic glass fins. For those of you who don't know what dichroic glass is, it's very fun rainbow glass that refracts the light and creates both a reflection as well as a shadow in different tones. And so the composition is meant to evoke music in some ways, with a treble clef above, bass clef below, with different rhythms punctuating this facade in different ways to create an animated facade that will change throughout the day as the sun moves across. Those solar shades are actually functional, though. We are trying to limit our solar intake into the glass and reduce our cooling load. The energy efficiency of this building, we're hoping to be a very high performance building. We're working with LN Consulting down the street and hoping to do a geothermal ground source heat pump system. That would mean this would be all electric to meet building Burlington's clean heat standard. If possible, we can load this rooftop with solar and perhaps be net zero. Sandy's got to find all the money first, but you know, these are the things that we're trying to work through the details of. If you want to go to the next slide, there's a detail of this entrance canopy for folks to see. There's a little bit more detail here. We took one of the columns and turned it down on its side to bring people in, pull people into the site and create a nice place to sit. A little bit more detail there of the facade. We can go to the next one. And this is a view looking more straight on from Flynn Avenue, looking at that facade. So again, you can't see the flags quite as much when you're looking at it straight on, but the windows are jittering across the facade to create that visual interest. I didn't mention it before, but we do have some frontage on Pine Street. There we're hoping to locate Howard Center's Community Arts Hub. And so that would be slightly separated from the main front door of the building and serve as an access. Maybe even perhaps these meetings could be there in the future, which would be wonderful to have another community space within the neighborhood. But that will create a nice building facade along Pine Street, separating the underground parking from the streetscape. So that's where we're at with the building. We thought a lot about this, but we have not visited the community yet. And so we've completed schematic design, but we have lots of more work to do. So if folks have questions or comments or concerns, now is a good time for us to hear that feedback from the community. So thank you.
Thank you. Questions?
Question.
Down here.
I just want to say that building was great, and you don't often see buildings where, you know, people are trying to. Social services buildings, you don't often see them looking so nice, and it's so important for the people looking to get help and for the people who are doing that work. To exist and work and get help in a place that they feel respected by. So thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate that feedback.
Other questions and comments?
Another question. You have a parking lot that fronts on Pine Street. Does that go away with your addition, your building?
No, the Pine Street lot will remain, but in a smaller form. Right now, it's about 20 cars, and we're gonna, half of that lot will be under the new building, and so we'll have about 10 to 11 spots. So we still will have a Pine Street curb cut.
You said 98 spaces.
Correct.
What's your total spaces currently?
I should have looked that up. I'm sorry. I believe it's about 30 something. It's not a lot.
No, total. Because you have an access from Flint as well.
Yes.
So what's your total parking space count?
Don't know off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Are you gonna add or?
We need to have more parking ultimately than we currently have.
Okay. Thank you.
What's the timeline you're hoping for? When do you expect to do this?
Sure, yeah, the timeline is, we're hoping to start construction in the spring of 2024. And complete it by probably towards the spring of 2025. Yes.
I was just wondering if the white building that's on Pine Street and set back a little bit, the big house, is that part of Howard Center now?
The one on the other side of the brook?
Uh-huh.
Yes, that is one of our properties.
But that's gonna stay the same?
Yes, yes, no change.
Other questions?
I have one last question, which is just what can the community do to support this project?
Well, I can't help but say, anyone can contribute at any time on howardcenter.org. And I think, genuinely, we're looking for feedback. And for input, and we'll be doing the same with all of our staff and with our clients as well, but really looking to the community, both as neighbors, as community members, and also within the building. How we can do the best that we can, what haven't we thought about that can benefit all of us. And again, want to appreciate your comment earlier. I think a primary driver of what we're trying to do, and when I think about parity for mental health services, substance use disorder services, and how I individually feel when I go for physical health services where I might feel respected in a nice facility, our clients, our staff deserve the same.
A
And that is one
dignified
of our primary
experience.
goals. Absolutely. That's right.
Yeah, and I'll just add that our schedule right now has us going to the Development Review Board and the Conservation Board and the Design Advisory Committee in April, May of, this coming April, May. So if you're willing to show up at one of those meetings and offer your support, we would greatly appreciate it.
Joe, could you identify yourself? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm Joe White. I'm with White and Burke Real Estate Advisors, and we are the project manager and development advisor.
Thank you. We have 1 more minute for questions.
Andy?
Oh, Terry, you've got a question too. I'm gonna let Peggy go and then Terry and then Billy, and then we gotta wind it up.
I'm Peggy Owen Sands. I live on Ledgmere Street, but you said that there will be primary care services, and I'm assuming you're talking about primary care and mental health services?
Physical primary care services, so a primary care physician. So we don't have all the details hammered out yet, but we are creating a space for those services to be offered. So we'll be hopefully partnering with physicians in the community and other organizations to be able to provide on-site primary care. Again, thinking about our client experience and trying to get them their all the access to services, not only Howard Center services in a single location, but also other services that might be prohibitive for them to go to another location to be able to access that service as well.
I'm just surprised because the community health center has a facility that's stone's throw kind of from where you're gonna be. Okay.
Terry,
Yeah, I might have missed this in your presentation. Please excuse me, or I apologize in advance. Are you consolidating your sites? Is this, are you going to be closing some of your sites and moving staff from other locations to the Pine Street location?
We are not closing any of our sites. Part of this is moving some programming around. Again, when we think about clients going to multiple buildings and wanting to have them be able to access their services in one site. So there will be some staff in other locations moving into this building. And it also affords us the opportunity for some growth and expansion as we burst at the seams a bit. So as we look towards the future.
Billy, did you have a question?
Just very quickly, I know you'd said you talked to the one property owner who abuts you. Have you talked at all with St. Anthony's across the street? In part just because I'm curious that I know they had tried to do a large development, not, a couple years back, and I do view this as sort of not for the good in many ways, changing the character of the neighborhood. So just be curious what their perspective is, if any.
We haven't had direct communications with them, conversations recently. We did several years ago when they were looking at some redevelopment as well. We did notify all of the neighbors with a notification, including St. Anthony's, and inviting feedback with them. We have also looked as we looked at this work the past couple of years, we've taken a look around the community about where should we really be located? Could we move further out of town? Would that be beneficial? We looked at where our clients are located, where they were coming from. And we looked at community partners that we needed to be proximate to, and really landed on the south end of Burlington. We looked at other properties that might be available and explored some other properties. We had a couple times have had some folks that help us out with real estate take a look at current buildings that maybe we could purchase and use for our needs, and really haven't found anything in the area that meets our needs. So we circled back to a property that we already own the land and that has served us very well as far as the location, really feeling like it's a prime location. So that's where we are today.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Each of these topics, it feels like we could keep talking about, and I hope you'll come back and talk to us some more.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next topic has to do with Rhino Foods. So take center stage, please. Thank you, Peggy.
What's the best way for me to connect? So if you can get on the Zoom link.
We've got a moment for technical adjustments here to get this presentation up and running. Anybody have any comments that they want to slip in while we're in transition here?
Do you have a?
On any topic at all?
Yeah, just do Burlington contest. Okay. Which would you? It's really up to you.
I want to remind people that our next scheduled meeting is January 19th, 2023. And that's Thursday, the third Thursday of every month. We'll continue to have hybrid meetings so that you can Zoom in, or you can come here to the conference room at the Department of Public Works, 645 Pine Street. So both options will continue to be available. Thanks to Charlie Giannoni for working the camera and the microphone so well, and to Sam, who's currently working out the technical difficulties here at DPW.
If we're continuing to look to eat up some time, Andy cut me off when we're no longer looking to do that. One other thing that I would promote is that we are looking to get more people on the Ward 5 NPA steering committee. If getting involved with the Ward 5 NPA is something that you're interested in, we would love to get more voices on here. It's not a huge commitment, but it's a great way to get to know your neighbors and get to know the issues that are going on. So just a little pitch for that.
Thank you, Billy. Are we ready? Are we rolling? If you,
technology allows.
good. Well, if you could,
I'll introduce myself. I'm Ted Castle, the owner of Rhino Foods. I don't know where people, if people know where we are, but we'll show some drawings, and we have Nick from Food Tech, who's been working with us, Matt Greer, who works at Rhino, and Blaine Paxton, who's running this project. So we're excited to show you what we're up to. It's very early in the process, and so we're here to bring some concepts forward for you folks to hear what you think. So it's pretty much a general meeting just to introduce ourselves to your group.
Sure. These will pick it up.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then make sure that your sound is all the way down as well under
Okay. Okay, perfect. So again, my name is Blaine Paxton. So I lead supply chain planning efforts at Rhino Foods. And thanks again for giving us some of your time for us to share some details of this project. We'll just do a few intro slides to give the project some context, and then we'll turn it over to our lead architect to walk through some of the details of the project. So Rhino Foods has been growing pretty quickly. We will share just a little bit of information about that. We see continued trajectory for growth and job creation. And so we're seeing a need no later than 2026 to have some sort of an expansion of our manufacturing and distribution capacity. I'm just going to jump right into the agenda items. Let Ted cover this quick overview of Rhino's products, our growth and our team.
So we're a privately held business. We started the Champlain Mill in Winooski and have been here since about 1991. We've made lots of different products, but primarily our products right now are cookie dough. Very good for you. If you eat cookie dough ice cream, you're in great shape. And so that's really what we do. We've grown in the last, since 2017, we've had some pretty fortunate growth and gone from about a $30 million company to about a $60 million company. Hopefully you folks know that we employ over 200 people in the Burlington community. We have a very diverse workforce. We have what we call inclusive hiring. So we hire people out of incarceration and substance abuse. So we have what we call a really open hiring system. And we try to put the effort into helping people be successful, not have a system where we're trying to exclude people. And we've had probably close to 30 to 40% of our workforce has been refugees for the last probably 20 years. So, we like being in Burlington. We've been fortunate to grow, and we've been fortunate to stay privately held, and hopefully people know that we're a good community member. So we look forward to seeing if we can keep growing in Burlington.
All right, real quickly, let's put the project in context in terms of the timeline. So starting on the left over here, of course, we're here at the end of 2022. We've just completed a conceptual engineering study, which we're about to share some highlights of. Then we're just starting to engage with the city right now, and will for the next few months. And in parallel to that, we are also aggressively exploring the veggie grant program, as well as other economic incentives. And all of that leads to, along with our evaluation of alternatives to this project, go, no-go date, no later than June 2023. And so then you can see the rest of the project timeline, which I won't go over, but would eventually lead to construction finishing in early 2025 and then occupancy by mid to late 25. Okay, and then just quickly to orient, if you're not familiar with exactly where Rhino Foods is, we're over on Queen City Park Road, formerly Industrial Boulevard or Industrial Road, and then right across from Burton Boys. All right, with that, we will turn it over to Nick Struve to go through some of the details.
All right, thanks, Blaine. Quick introduction for myself. My name is Nick Struve. I'm an architect with Food Tech. We're a design build company that specializes in the food and beverage industry. So I'll take you through what we've been working on recently here. The first slide is showing the existing property as it is today. You can see the existing facility as well as the adjacent parcel, which is also owned by Rhino. And what we're looking to do is basically maximize the usage of this available space and create a building that would essentially be the central location with all parts of the operation all under one roof. The existing facility is primarily a production facility as it is, and the distribution portion is handled in a separate facility. And the expansion that we're looking at putting on this building would bring that distribution portion onto this building here. Blaine, you can go to the next slide. So the area highlighted in yellow is the footprint of the proposed building expansion. And as I said, it's going to be primarily for a distribution center. So it's going to have a lot of refrigerated storage areas, ambient storage for various materials for the production, as well as a shipping and receiving dock. The building itself will be similar materials to the existing building, so insulated metal panel. Obviously, for the refrigerated spaces inside, it's important to maintain the refrigerated environments within the structure. In an effort to maximize the available storage within the building, this new addition would be a little over 40 feet in height, and that's to maximize the pallet, the levels of pallet storage within the building. I think that covers mostly from the site. If we go to the next one, we can take a look at the floor plan and get a feel for some of the spaces within. There we go. So here you can see a big chunk of the lower portion of the building. North is kind of to the right on this, so it'd be the east side of the building. Would be freezer storage space while the finished product is going. Kind of in the middle of the building is where the ambient storage would be. Just to the right of that is where they're labeled as future manufacturing spaces. So those would be directly adjacent to where the existing production spaces are, and we're essentially just kind of expanding that space directly to the south in this new addition. Then the next slide. And then here's a rendering of what this addition would look like. As you can see, where the intention would be to include solar on the roof, as we obviously have a lot of roof space to work with. We're looking at about 62,000 square feet total in this building addition. So looking to maximize that opportunity if we can for inclusion of the solar panels. So it's really a direct extension of the existing building, obviously considerably taller given the storage needs of the newer portion. But again, it's very similar in materials. It brings pretty much everything Rhino needs into one central facility to cover their full operation. So that was the quick overview of the project that we're looking at, and similar to the last presentation, looking to present this to the community, get some feedback, and kind of make everyone aware of what direction we're looking at going with this new addition.
Thanks, Nick. Yeah, so that's we want to keep it brief, so we could, just like the last presentation, open it up for plenty of time for comments, questions.
So thank you. Comments, questions, observations, Sam?
Are you planning on any pedestrian improvements along the street?
We met and we went through technical review with different department heads just last week and learned about some potential projects on the other side of Wood City Mark Road.
Okay.
And so I think that would be a conversation that would be ongoing. They were suggested that potentially we could put in a crosswalk to allow anyone to move that way
Because there's currently no sidewalk along that street at all, and so there's planning for a sidewalk on the other street.
This is second.
The other side? Okay, yeah, that's fine, yeah.
So I don't want to misrepresent anything, but we heard for the first time, at least that way there was a concept.
That'll be good.
Okay, just so you know, people online cannot hear someone.
I'm so sorry.
So.
Oh, yeah, you can bring that over.
Thank you.
Okay. Other questions, observations, comments? Sam?
Just online.
Okay, 2 online comments. Billy?
What will the route be for trucks leaving there? And is there any anticipated improvements to some of the roads in that area?
So, yeah,
Right now, our trucks go off over the bridge. I don't even know the name of that bridge or the road. The 1-lane bridge there that's on the corner, sort of on the corner where Burton is now and Edlin is across. That's really the truck traffic. And I think it's important for people to know that we have a warehouse. It's about 60,000 square feet in Williston that we use. They were leasing. And this is what the time frame, and we actually have a lot of 3PL in Avon, Massachusetts. So we're trying to bring everything under the same roof to become more efficient and be able to really continue to grow, because these efficiencies are really what keeps you from being competitive.
Would you turn on one of those lights?
I didn't hear it.
I don't think that was a question yet, so. But Lori, do you have a question?
I do. Thank you. Good evening. This is Laurie Smith. And my first question is, at your loading docks, where you currently have loading docks, a number of your trucks have refrigeration units on the trailers. I'm assuming that these new trailers will have the new loading dock will have trailers with refrigeration units on them as well. Is that correct?
that's correct. Many of them, not all of them, but many of them, yes.
Okay, so in that regard, my question is, have you considered reconfiguring the building so that the loading dock is facing Queen City Park Road instead of configured in such a way that the noise from those units will be reflected onto the residents that are behind you on Austin Drive?
We considered a few different layouts. This is the one that operationally works the best, and we also were advised that a concern of the city might be actually, having visibility to the docks from Queen City Park Road. That wasn't the driving concern, but that's one of the things that we heard. Also, I think it's worth noting that behind the existing building, that there is soundproofing, and we're absolutely open to continuing to talk about that and extend that this way. There's also an elevation change, a natural elevation change right back here. It's on the order of 10 to 12 feet. So without being an acoustical engineer, you get that provides some level of sound abatement to the neighbors that are,
Okay. Well, I'll just follow up saying that I understand the visual concerns, and I do know that the neighbors have had continuing concerns with noise issues. And if those noise issues can be directed towards Queen City Park Road instead of the residences, I think you'll have an easier time getting the project through. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention. Thank you.
appreciate it.
I guess I have a question that Lori has been in the past very involved with the work around the potential higher ground expansion. I'm wondering what increased traffic on that small road will, I mean, this was mentioned before, but on that small road coming out, what impact that will have and what improvements would be needed in order to handle all that traffic?
Yeah, so right now we've engaged a, preliminary traffic study, so we don't have the answers, but we will shortly and probably the next 2 weeks. The difference, but right now what we do is there's trucks going back and forth, bringing raw materials to the plant and then finished goods out. So this will increase truck traffic, and we'll have the numbers within a few weeks.
Okay.
One thing that's important to know that we talk about the 225 employees. We're a 3-shift operation, so they're not all on site at the same time. And we also have a fair number of people that take the bus. So that's one of the advantages of us staying in Burlington is the bus routes. We have a lot of folks that are taking the bus that don't have cars. And so that's one of the reasons why we like Burlington, quite frankly. It allows us to have sort of a thriving workforce that is, doesn't have cars, quite frankly. So I just want to highlight that we're, even though there's 225 people that work there, it's over 3 shifts.
And you've had no trouble finding workers?
Oh, yeah, we have lots of trouble finding workers, yes. We're giving people $1,500 if they bring a friend, if they stay for 6 months, the person gets $2,000. So that's a type of recruiting that goes on right now in Burlington and all over Vermont, is trying to find workers.
The other thing I would say, and just in terms of traffic, we're not talking about a doubling or tripling of our workforce. So, there's a range of scenarios, but, probably not even 50% more. So just to, assuage any fears that there's going to be this wave of cars with this dramatic increase. It's nothing on the order of that.
We have a question right behind you. Could you introduce yourself?
My name is Patrick Mulligan. I live in Ward 5 off Locust Street.
Thanks.
With the building of Champlain Parkway, will that mitigate a lot of the traffic issues?
Are you asking me or somebody else?
I'm just asking in general. I mean, with it's gonna cross Champlain Parkway. So basically, Queen City Boulevard to Pine Street is gonna be closed. Champlain Parkway will be a direct exit or on ramp to I-89. I'm correct, Brian?
You are correct. Yep.
So I mean, that'll mitigate a lot of traffic issues in my mind through the neighborhood. I'm just wondering have you considered that?
I wouldn't be able to speak to that project, so I don't know if there's anybody here that is more familiar with the timeline of that.
It's under construction. It does have some delays because it's a big project with lots of complicated factors. So, but it is under construction, and I think your timeline is probably pretty close to where things will end up, where they are heading, at least at this rate. So I think Patrick raises an important point that would alleviate quite a bit of truck traffic, which was actually part of the whole purpose of the parkway. Like the parkway or not, it is intended to mitigate the impact of lots of truck traffic in residential neighborhoods.
If you could identify yourself, since we're not seeing you on the screen right now, that would be great.
Oh, I'm Brian Pine from CDL.
Thank you. So I'm sure that there will be many more questions. Thank you for coming. And Brian, you have a question?
It's more just to sort of express our support, speaking for the city, that the role of a company like Rhino in the only area for the city that's zoned and was specifically created as an industrial park. That is literally what that whole area was designed and purposely built and developed for the purpose of manufacturing. There's very little manufacturing left in Vermont and very little in Burlington, but Rhino is one of the only remaining manufacturers that has not just provides family wage jobs, but provides access to employment for many folks for whom labor market participation is challenging. And they've been an exemplary employer since over 20 years, for more than that, hiring new Americans who have very limited English proficiency and working with them to ensure that not only can they do the work, but that they develop the skills to navigate life as well. So I think this is a pretty unique opportunity to particularly talk about creation of jobs. There's a really important piece, which is retention and preservation of jobs. And this is a project that retains jobs in our region. And the bus commitment is significant because Green Mountain Transit is right next door. It is the most serviced public transit employer perhaps anywhere because of the location. You have every bus originates, and does a route from there.
Thank you, Brian. I think that's all for tonight. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you, Nick. And thank you everybody who came tonight. Our next meeting is January 19th next year, and I hope to see you there.
Happy New Year.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Andy.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Andy, for
Laura.
being there.